wind howled across the parched plains that evening, carrying with it the smell of dust, desperation, and broken dreams. The sun hung low, bleeding red across the western sky, painting everything in a color that looked too much like sorrow. And down that long dirt road, a single rider approached, his silhouette tall and unyielding against the dying light. He was Cole Hardin, the richest rancher in the county, a man whose name carried weight heavier than gold, and a heart said to be harder than the stones that lined the Rio Blanco. His boots had walked over more broken men than he could count, and his eyes, cold as gunmetal, had seen every kind of ruin except his own. But that evening, he wasn't riding into town to make a deal. He was riding to collect on one. At the end of that dirt road stood a small, leaning cabin. Smoke struggled to crawl out of the chimney, and the paint was more memory than color. The fences were down, the well nearly dry, but to one woman, that dying land was all the world she had left. Inside, Clara Mayfield sat by the cracked window, hands trembling around a chipped teacup. She had known this day would come, had counted the days, even prayed for rain to wash the debt away. But rain had stopped visiting months ago, and so had mercy. The sound of hooves reached her first. Then the knock, 3 firm strikes that seemed to echo through the bones of the house. She opened the door slowly. Cole Hardin stood there tall and straight, his hat shadowing half his face. Behind him his horse snorted impatiently, dust rising around its hooves. "Evening, Miss Mayfield," he said, his voice low and even, like thunder before a storm. "I reckon you know why I'm here." Clara's lips parted, but no sound came out at first. She'd spent all week trying to find the words that could save her, and now, face to face with him, she realized she had none. "Mr. Hardin," she finally whispered, "please don't take my home. My pa, he promised he'd pay. He just didn't live long enough to keep his word." Cole's eyes shifted toward the dry fields beyond her, the dying stalks swaying like ghosts. "He was a good man, Miss Mayfield, but business don't stop for sorrow. You understand that, don't you?" Clara stepped out onto the porch, the wood creaking under her bare feet. "It's all I got left, sir. I got nowhere to go. No kin, no money. I'll work the land harder than any man alive. Just give me time." Her voice cracked halfway through, and she bit down hard to keep from crying. The sight of her, thin, tired, but standing proud, stirred something unexpected in Cole's chest, something he didn't have a name for. He looked away quickly, jaw tightening. "Time don't grow crops," he muttered. "And mercy don't pay debts." When she dropped to her knees, the sound of her plea was something he'd remember for the rest of his life. "Please, don't take my home." The words hit him harder than any bullet ever could. The wind seemed to stop, the air thick with her desperation. Cole turned, ready to walk away, but something, maybe the way her voice trembled, maybe the look in her eyes, made him stop. He stared out toward the horizon for a long while before speaking again. "There might be one way," he said quietly. Clara blinked, confused. "One way?" He turned back toward her, his eyes unreadable. "You keep the land, the house, everything. I won't take a thing." Her heart lifted for half a second before he finished. "But you'll have to be my wife." The words hung between them like a rattlesnake's hiss. Slow, deadly, impossible to ignore. Clara's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. She stared at him, half thinking it was a cruel joke. But Cole Hardin wasn't a man who joked. "Your wife," she finally whispered. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. "You're strong. You work hard, and I ain't had a kind soul in my house for years. I don't need love, Miss Mayfield, just someone who won't run when things get rough. You get to keep your home. I get a wife. That's fair, ain't it?" Her heart hammered in her chest. Fair. The word tasted bitter on her tongue. What he was offering wasn't love or kindness. It was survival. I can't," she murmured. "Then I'll send the men to clear the land by morning," he said, turning toward his horse. The world began to spin. She imagined her father's grave by the oak tree, the nights she'd spent whispering prayers into the dark, the mornings when the sun rose and she'd tell herself she could make it one more day. All of that, all she'd fought for, would be gone. "Wait," she cried. He stopped, looking back over his shoulder. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of her dress. "If I say yes, you'll let me keep the house?" He nodded once. "You have my word." Her breath came shallow. "I'll do it." Cole's face didn't change. No smile, no satisfaction. Just a quiet nod before he said, "I'll send for the preacher." That night, Clara didn't sleep. The little house seemed to whisper her father's voice, warning her, forgiving her, breaking her heart all over again. She stared at the ceiling, wondering what kind of woman traded freedom for four walls. By sunrise, she stood on the porch in her mother's faded wedding dress. The lace had yellowed, the hem torn, but it was all she had. Cole arrived on horseback, hat in hand. They said their vows beneath the oak tree where her father lay, the preacher's voice trembling in the dry morning air. When he said, "You may kiss the bride," Cole didn't. He just nodded, helped her onto his horse, and rode her toward his sprawling ranch, a place twice the size of her dreams and half as warm. The days that followed were quiet, almost cruel in their stillness. Cole worked the land by day and sat alone at night, staring into the fire as if it might tell him who he was supposed to be. Clara cooked, cleaned, and tended to the small garden near the porch. They spoke little, and when they did, it was about cattle, fences, or rain that never came. But sometimes in the silence, she caught him watching her. And once, when she cut her hand mending his shirt, he rushed to her side faster than she thought possible. His hands were rough but careful as he wrapped the wound. "You ought to be more careful," he said softly. She looked up, meeting his eyes. "Didn't think you cared." He looked away quickly, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Maybe I don't." But she saw it then. Beneath the hardened man was someone who'd forgotten how to be soft. One night, a storm rolled in fierce and sudden. Rain pounded the roof like 1,000 angry fists. When the thunder cracked, Clara ran outside. One of the horses had broken free, panicked near the old bridge. She didn't call for help. She just ran. Cole found her moments later, the rain drenching her dress, the foal trapped in the mud near the collapsing bridge. He waded in after her, grabbing her arm just as the bridge gave way behind them. They stumbled onto the bank, both gasping for breath, rain mixing with tears. She didn't realize she was crying. He held her by the shoulders, his voice shaking with anger and something else he didn't recognize. "Are you out of your damn mind? You could have died." She looked up, her hair plastered to her face. "It's not just a horse, Cole, it's life. Something worth saving." For a moment neither spoke. Then he said, quieter now, "You think I don't know what worth saving feels like." The storm raged around them, but she felt the world narrow down to the space between his eyes and hers. He lifted a trembling hand and brushed the wet strands of hair from her face. "You were right that night," he murmured. "I didn't know you, but I do now." Before she could speak, he pulled her close, his lips finding hers in the rain. It wasn't gentle. It was years of loneliness, guilt, and unspoken need breaking free all at once. When the storm passed, the land looked new again, washed clean, alive. And something inside both of them had changed too. Months later, the ranch flourished. The fields grew green, the cattle fat, and the laughter of a woman filled the rooms that had long echoed with silence. Cole still didn't say much, but his eyes told every story his lips could not. And Clara? She never forgot that day on her porch, the day the richest man in the valley took everything from her, only to give her more than she ever dreamed of. Sometimes at sunset, she'd stand beside him at the fence line, the sky glowing gold and the world quiet again. He'd reach for her hand without a word, and she'd squeeze it gently, smiling, because some debts, she'd learned, aren't paid in money. They're paid in love. And sometimes love doesn't come with roses or promises. It comes riding on horseback, wearing a shadow, and offering the kind of deal that changes a life forever.